What's going on, everybody? My name is Matt, and welcome to the JavaScript tutorial. Now, I want to say up front, before I even go into any of the stuff that we're going to be talking about in this introduction, if you are an experienced programmer, this may not be the playlist for you, though you are welcome to check it out if you need some refreshers. This is definitely geared more towards people who have never programmed ever in their life, or maybe people who've never programmed specifically with JavaScript. But there's going to be a lot of things that we talk about here that are brand new to people who are programmers for the first time. Well, not for the first time, but they are in the baby stage of programming. I don't know why I said the first time. I mean, it isn't like you become a programmer and then not become one and then become one again. That doesn't really make any sense. Um, but it's for those who have never coded in their entire life. But it's also important to know that this series is not going to be just teaching you how to use JavaScript by itself and how to learn the syntax and stuff. That's part of it. But the big point that we're going to be trying to hit throughout this entire series is how do we use JavaScript to solve problems? How do we think critically and come up with solutions to problems and conflicts using JavaScript? That's the main goal, because it's one thing to be able to code, it's another thing to be able to think like a programmer or like a software developer. And that's my goal here in this series. Now, before we go into anything specific, I want to tell you about the tools that I'm using here that you have on your screen right now. These are things that you're going to see throughout the entire series, so I might as well go ahead and tell you what I'm using so that you also can use these tools to follow along. So the big and obvious one is that I'm using Visual Studio Code. This is what everything that you see here on my screen is Visual Studio Code. I'll have a link in the description if you want to go and download that. Or you could just go to Google and type in VS Code or Visual Studio Code, and it'll pop up. It's pretty self-explanatory on their website how to download it. And then once you get that downloaded, immediately for this series, I recommend going to extensions, which is like these four. It's the three little squares here, and then the floating square off to the side. You just type in the word JavaScript in the search bar, and then this is the specific one that I'm going to be using here, which is JavaScript ES6 code snippets. This is super helpful because it'll essentially allow you to code, and it'll give you suggestions as you're typing out your code. And usually the suggestions that it's giving you are what you're actually looking for. So you can, hit tab or hit enter on whatever it is that it's suggesting, and it'll type that out for you. It'll save you time, but it'll also catch errors that you're from how you're typing your JavaScript. It'll catch some errors or duplicate code or things like that as you're going along. So it's just a super helpful resource to have as you're starting to learn how to use JavaScript. And even if you've been using JavaScript for a very long time, I would never take this tool away because I don't want to have to just sit down and type it out like I would if I'm in just a notepad. So this is just a super helpful, user-friendly extension that you're going to need. Another extension that would be very helpful, and I also would suggest this if you don't have this. This one's not necessarily required, but it's a really helpful thing to have, and it's known as Prettier. This is actually a code formatter, as you see here at the top. And what this does is whenever you save your file, it's going to automatically format it in the proper indentation. It might even add a semicolon at the end of your line if you forget one. It's just a really helpful thing to use, and you can see here all the different languages that it's good for, which is basically everything that you need in this lesson because you have JavaScript right here. And then if you ever get into JSX with React, which also uses JavaScript, or maybe you get into TypeScript later on, which is just a superset of JavaScript, this is still going to be something that transfers into that new set of code that you're going to be typing. So yeah, and then if you want to know how to set this up, it has some instructions here in the description. But you could also, what I did is I went to YouTube and it basically told me how to have my settings in the best possible way, so that way whenever I save, it just makes it look good. And then finally, the thing that I'm gonna be using pretty much this entire series and basically every episode we're gonna be coding. It's Node.js. So I'll have a link for that in the description as well. But Node.js is how we're going to be able to test our code. So that's something that we're definitely going to want to have um, as we're starting to code and as we start to test our code. Otherwise, we're not even going to know if our code works. And Node.js is by far the best way to test that code. And it comes with a lot of other things as well. It allows you to, do imports and exports and things like that. But we're not getting into that right now. We're mainly talking about the introduction. So let's actually start by let's start creating a file. Let's go ahead and get ourselves set up to where we can start coding. Okay. So what we need to do is you hit the Explorer. I actually already have a folder open. You might have somewhere on your screen in this general area something that says Open File. I would recommend opening a folder first. You can call it Tutorial, you can call it JavaScript, I mean, you can call it whatever you'd like. And then you want to open that folder here in Visual Studio Code. It should be pretty user-friendly. If you need help setting that up, YouTube is also a great resource. But that's just an easy way to have it set up, is using their little their buttons here that they have as soon as you open Visual Studio Code. Now, once you have your folder open, you want to hear this little square icon here. It says New File. And then you want to type, you can really name this whatever you'd like, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to call it Toad. You know what? For that, I'm tempted to call it Toad. Nah, we're going to call it code.js. The JS is very important here because what it's doing is it's telling your computer that whenever this code is being ran, read this code as JavaScript. Otherwise, if I were to change this to .py, for example, that would represent Python code. But then if I started typing in JavaScript, we're going to run into a whole lot of problems because our system is trying to read Python code, but it's actually getting JavaScript code. It's going to be just very confusing, and it's not going to work the way that you might think. The way that you can know if this worked or not when you type this in is you should see the little JS symbol here next to it. If you don't see that, you probably typed something incorrectly, and you might want to go ahead and get that corrected now. If you have to pause the video, go ahead and do so. Otherwise, nothing going forward is going to work. It's very important that you have .js and that it's actually responding correctly by giving you that little symbol to let you know, hey, okay, I get it, you're using JavaScript. And then from here, we actually are going to be using something known as the terminal. So you can see here at the top, it has a terminal button that you can hit, and you can hit the word new terminal here. Another way that you can do this is if it's going to be down here at the bottom, you can actually go down here and drag it up. And I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom this in a little bit for you guys, so that way you guys are able to follow along without any issue seeing this. You want to make sure that you're also in the correct folder. So if you don't see your folder at the very end here, so let me just give you an example as to what this might look like. If it says something like desktop, or maybe it says something like users, or maybe your name or your drive, whatever it might say, if it doesn't say your folder, you want to make sure to get to your folder. So let's just say in this case you're like me and you're stuck on desktop, and then you want to get to your tutorial folder within your desktop. The way that you do that is you type in cd and then you type in the name of your folder. So tutorial. Now, if you're somewhere totally different, you're going to want to make sure that you work your way to your folder using the proper path within your Files Explorer, which I would recommend going and look at that if you need to. For most of us, when you first start this project, it should automatically be in the correct folder, but it's really important that you just make sure that that is correct before doing anything else. Now, all of that being said, well, actually, before we go into typing our first code, let me tell you what this. Whoops, did not mean to close out that one. Have a lot of empty space here. Let's go ahead and clear that. All right. Let me tell you what this terminal is used for. I realized that I pulled this up and I was about ready to start typing our first line of code. But let me explain why we even need this terminal. But this terminal is a text-based interface where you can interact with your computer by typing commands instead of using graphical interface, such as, like over here you have all these icons. You have your icons here at the bottom. In your file system, you'll see all the different buttons that you can click. This is a text-based way of navigating through your computer. But you can also do things like running programs and scripts. You can navigate your file system. You can install software or dependencies. You can do version control through tools like Git, which we're not going to cover in this course, but version control can be done here through the terminal. It can automate tasks, and I mean, there's just many more things. And mainly we're going to be worrying about running our programs and scripts, though we might actually use it for other things as well. I just gave you an example on how we navigate our file system using the terminal. We're not going to go super in depth with that, but it's just important that this terminal is seen as a place that we can go if we want to use text to do something with our program or with our computer. Okay. Now, this is technically called the terminal, but it's important for you guys to know up front that I'm going to get this backwards with console more times than I'm going to be able to express, mainly because a lot of the code that we're going to be typing to put things into our terminal is going to be prefaced with the word console. So like, for example, we're going to be learning today about a console.log command, and that's it for me. It's like, okay, we're logging something to the console. Now, the reason why it's called console is if you were to open your browser, I'm just going to show you right here. We're on Google now, but if you were to hit F12, you'll see right over here on the right a console. So let me see if I can zoom this in. I can. You'll see here at the top there's console. And we're actually going to use this here in a second, so I'm going to leave this here for now. But if you were to have an HTML file, for example, that you're pairing with this, let's say that you're making a web application, then anything that you put that would normally print something to the terminal is going to print to the console whenever you run that file. So I'm going to use those terms back. I mean, you call it terminal sometimes. I might sometimes call it console, but I just want to make sure that you guys understand that I mean the same thing. Like it's the terminal most of the time. But I'm used to calling it console because JavaScript calls it console logs, not terminal logs. But anyway, I just want to make that known up front because I know I'm going to mess that up, and just don't go to the comments and be like, oh, I can't believe Matt messed that up. But let's go ahead and let's talk about typing our first line of code. I mentioned console logs. Let's go ahead and figure out how to do that. Now, what we're about to do is known as printing something to the console or logging something to the console or the terminal. And you'll see what I mean as I do this. So to do this, you would type in the words. Let me go ahead and put this section away. If you ever want to move the Explorer off your screen, just hit this again, and it takes it off your screen. This will give us a little bit more space to work with. All right, so what you want to do is you want to type console.log, open and closed parentheses, and then in quotation marks, I'm going to put the words hello world. And then I'm going to end my line with a semicolon. This is what tells our program, okay, we're at the end of our line of code, and it's ready to be executed. So whenever, and sometimes this semicolon can make or break. You could run into a lot of errors for forgetting your semicolon in some programs and in some instances. Console log, it doesn't freak out as much, but it's definitely something that needs to be there. Like if I were to not include it, this would still work, but it's something that you want to make sure that you include on there anyway. It's just a good habit to have because some programs won't be able to do it. But anyways, without further ado, how do we actually print this to the console? Well, to do that, we're going to use Node.js that I mentioned earlier. We're going to type the word node, and then we're going to type the name of our file. So code.js. And when we hit enter, you're going to see hello world that we just typed here put into the terminal. The same would be true if we were to go to our program here and type console.log hello world, close that, and boom. I love how it's already suggesting this, indicating that I've done this before. When I hit enter, it's still going to log it to the console here. Don't worry about this undefined. This basically means, was there a value returned from doing what you did before? But we haven't even talked about return things yet, so we're just not going to worry about it here. There's another type of console log that's important, and I'm going to have to actually show you here on this console because you won't see this in the terminal. And that's what's known as a console.warn. And then you're going to open parentheses. I've typed this out before, and so that's why it's giving me these suggestions. But just ignore that. Pretend like you haven't seen that. But yeah, console.warn, and then put in quotation marks the word warning. You can honestly put anything here, but this is just so that we can get an idea as to what's going on. Hit enter, and now you notice that it highlights this whole line yellow, and then it gives you this orange triangle. This tells the person who's looking at this something happened, some kind of problem was encountered, but it's not that important that we look at it. Or maybe I'm just trying to warn the person looking at this, hey, keep an eye out for this, look at this. This is kind of something we're trying to work on, or whatever it might be, but it's not crucial that you have this resolved right now. So that's what the warn is used for. There's another one, though, all caps, console.error, and then let's just say we type in the word error. All right, and then when I hit enter here, now you notice the whole line turns red, and then we have this red circle with the white X in the middle of that. What this is telling the person looking at this is, hey, some kind of problem was encountered, and this needs to be addressed immediately if possible, because this is something that could have caused major issues to your program. Maybe something broke, maybe something was entered incorrectly. I mean, there's a plethora of things that could cause errors. And let me just go ahead and say up front, you are going to run into errors all the time in programming. This is not something that you need to just think, oh my goodness, I never want to have errors. Errors are something that are inevitable. Every single one of us who are programmers, and I'm sure that you even now, whenever you start programming, you're going to run into errors because something was entered incorrectly, or something didn't work properly, or maybe there was a console.error built into something that you're using. I mean, there could be an infinite number of reasons why you're running into errors, and I consider errors to be a good thing. The reason why is you can figure out, hey, this is what's wrong with my program. This is why it's not working. Instead of it just running and having a bunch of issues, but you have no idea what happened. So the errors can be really helpful to helping you solve your problems. So don't think of errors as a bad thing. Think of errors as a tool that you can use to solve your problems, as I mentioned before. But let me just show you, whenever we use Visual Studio Code, if I were to try and do the same thing here and say console.error, it's still going to work, but it's not going to give me the red bar across. It's just going to print it to the console. So whenever you're using this, if you're not using a web application, it really doesn't make sense to use console.error, but it's a good habit to have, because if you're building stuff in JavaScript, there's a good chance that you're going to be using it on the web at some point. Maybe, I mean, I guess everything doesn't have to be on the web that you make in JavaScript, obviously, but JavaScript is most of the time used for web applications in most contexts. And so it's good. It's a good tool to have for whenever you want to have some kind of error printed when something happens, which we'll talk about that more later as we go. So, that being said, that's actually it for all of the tangible stuff that we're going to look at here in this video. We're not going to be typing any other code, but I do want to close out this video by saying it's going to be a little bit of, how do I word this? It's going to be a little bit intimidating as we begin coding. You're going to see all of these new things, and it's going to be a lot. And I know for a lot of people, it's, whenever you start seeing a lot of problems or start not understanding things, it is a sure sign that maybe you shouldn't be doing it, or maybe you're not good at it. Listen, nobody is good at things on the very first day. Everybody has a time when they have to sit down and learn how to do things. I'm still learning how to do things in JavaScript. So don't use confusion as a tool to just stop trucking along. If this is something that you want to learn and grow in, then just do it. I could start quoting Shia LaBeouf. Just do it. Don't let your dreams be dreams. But no, seriously, it's really important that you just keep going, because I promise you, as you keep going and as you keep practicing, it's going to stick. You just have to give it time. So for this lesson, maybe what you need to do is sit down and write 50 to 60 console.logs if you're not understanding how they work, just so that you can start understanding how they work. And you might have to do that for other things that we talk about later, because this is the simplest line of code that we're going to encounter in the entire lesson, and it's only going to get more complex from here. But I'm going to take it one step at a time, and I'm going to move as slow as I possibly can. but it's important that you follow along and practice. Don't just watch me do this and then assume that you know how to do it. And then in 20, 30 videos down the road, or even 5 videos down the road, I should say, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember how to do that. Or I don't even know what that is. I've just totally forgot. I didn't give it enough time. So start practicing now, and then as we go on, you'll start to see things stick in a lot better way. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, hit the like and subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you in our next video. Peace.